Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Welcome to Down with D&D. This is Shawn Merwin, and today my co-host returns for another stint in the co-hosting chair. I think if he does one more, he will get a free foot-long sub. I have with me Teos Abadia here to talk via our magic sending spell. Teos,
Shawn,
welcome back.
thank you for having me. I thought this was the one where I got the sub, so I'm a little disappointed going in.
Yeah. Okay. I think you get a 6-inch.
6-inch sub.
But if you do a couple more, you get the whole foot long.
Thanks.
So
Hold the tomatoes.
good times. Hey, thank you for coming to talk. For those people who haven't seen your previous 17 stints on the show, could you just give a little rundown, introduce yourself, let them know who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Teos Abadia. When I'm not trying to save the world through environmental projects that I do in my day job, I write primarily for D&D. I've been fortunate to write for a number of organized play events in the past, and working recently, I did with you. I worked on the Acquisitions Incorporated hardback book for D&D, working with Dwarven Forge, and probably the most recent thing I did was talk to my dog. No, it was he loves your show.
I know he's very vocal. He's also a co-host.
Yeah, that's my dog Chewy somewhere in the background. But yeah, he's been on the show before. The other thing that I recently did was to create the code of conduct for RPG projects and put that out on Drive-Thru and Itch for free.
Awesome. And we will have a link to those in the show notes.
Thanks.
Yep. So, you are surviving pandemic. You are continuing to work not only, as you said, saving the world through your environmental projects, but also on D&D projects. So how has the pandemic been treating you?
I am fortunate in that I normally work from home, so I feel very lucky. It's still been, I'd say, fairly traumatic and difficult for all of us, for my whole family. And then on the heels of the pandemic, to just have so much going on that affects our RPG community and intersects with it, from Black rights, Black Lives Matter, women in the industry, it's been tough times. So it is hard as a creator, and I'm sure you and I have talked about this. It's hard to create during times like this. It's hard to focus, but it also provides a certain amount of solace and refuge to bury yourself in writing.
Yeah, I almost have a feeling that the pandemic itself, while it's been rough, has been a catalyst for some of these things that have come out. And so in that sense, if that is going to be one of the legacies of this pandemic, then hopefully with a positive result, it will have been worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. As painful as it is, I'm glad that these topics are coming up in our industry, and that more people are, at least you see a lot of people on the side of wanting to fix these things, to right these wrongs and improve these conditions. And that's, like you said, it's great. If we have to go through this to get there, then right. Okay, I'm on board.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not trying to discount deaths and suffering and all that stuff, but sometimes in history, turbulent changes, social changes, come on the heels of turbulent wars or turbulent diseases, famine. All of those things tend to trigger. So it's historically, if you can step back and look at it, it's interesting. Living through it, it's hard to intellectualize it when people, real people are suffering. But yeah, and you're also right about the creative process is tenuous for a lot of people at best. And so, being in this sort of petri dish of angst and disease and so on can make it hard, but it also gives you, an idea of sometimes what other people have to go through just in their normal lives to create.
Yeah.
And it brings to light that sort of stress, and the people who do have these hurdles to get over and still create, hats off to them. And it just shows what tremendous work and what tremendous fortitude you need to be able to get over that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's also been interesting for me to see my kids, how they handle it. And my daughter certainly buried herself in work, even though she doesn't have to, and she's now on summer vacation. But she needs to be busy to sort of make it through this time of not, to be with friends or to be, she's supposed to be studying abroad in Japan. And so she's taking every seminar under the sun as a way to focus. And I'm writing a D&D adventure with my son, as I mentioned before, and we've been working on that together. And just there are different ways that they find to stay and keep focused.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter is supposed to be packing for England for a summer session abroad, and that obviously is not happening. And so it's just move on to the next thing and learn what you can while you can. So this weekend, something magnificent, wonderful, strange, new happened in the world of D&D. It was D&D Live 2020 online. Along with various partners, Wizards of the Coast brought D&D Live to the virtual masses. Due to the pandemic, this was the first year that there was really no in-person component. Everything was handled online. But Wizards of the Coast offered several different avenues of participation. Obviously, they had the big announcement, which is what the whole D&D Live is about, the announcement of the next storyline and the next products. You could also watch online games by a variety of celebrity DMs and players. You could vote in an online game called Reality RP, or you could read up on various areas of Icewind Dale on their interactive website, or you could play adventures online using a variety of online meeting tools and virtual tabletops. So that is a lot to unpack, because not only was it, hey, here's the new storyline, let's get excited, but it was really the first time that Wizards expanded this to a fully online experience. And there were a lot of lessons learned, I think, about the power of both D&D and the internet to bring people together and how it might look going forward. So, Teos, you want to pick one of those?
Yeah,
many
so I'll start with, because I had a lot of conversations about this aspect, which is the change from last year, right? So last year, what D&D Live was, it was in a Hollywood studio or a couple of studios where people would attend at a fairly high price to be able to rub shoulders and be in seats watching famous people play D&D. And those people were I think somewhat known for their already being adjunct or involved in D&D in some way, right, in some capacity. People like Deborah on Wall, right, that you can watch her awesome show. She runs D&D. She's been a guest. She does all these things, and she's a star. But this time, it was like the number of prominent names grew exponentially, and in a very different format, where now it's being shown online as the only venue, right? There's no venue to attend, no Hollywood studio to go to. Everybody's being brought in remotely, but yet it's bigger, which was really interesting, right? So it certainly didn't seem to be a hiccup from the live stream perspective of watching the game.
Right.
I mean, it was tremendous growth. I mean, a whole bunch of cast members from Game of Thrones. Like, if you could have landed one last year, that would have been really cool.
Yeah.
Table of them, and just and you had some famous people playing, who just any one of the names could have been a real shocker 5 years ago.
Right.
And there were multiples per table.
Right. I mean, we're talking like David Harbour.
Right.
From Stranger Things and several movies, even bigger and bigger movies as time has gone by.
It's absurd, right? Like, if you try to think at all of, like, if this was when we were kids, mm-hmm. and that some star from one of our shows back then, let alone multiple, I mean, we wouldn't have I don't know how we would have grasped that if that had happened, right?
Right. It's unfathomable, just because of the situation, that the early 80s, mid 80s, even into the 90s, where the game was looked at on as suspect,
Yeah.
right? A bit by certain segments of the population. So it would have been a total game changer.
Yeah.
For sure. And yeah, I looked in briefly when I was on some downtime from running games in on the Game of Thrones cast playing, and that was just out of control. I only watched for about 10 minutes, and I was just like, poor Kate, because I don't even know what I would do with this.
So I have watched 0 seconds of any of the online content because I was so busy this week and over preparing for my tables. But
right.
But it's on my list of to-dos, and I'm very excited. I've also had a pound of work to get through, but a round of work. But once I get through that, it is. I'm like dying to watch all this stuff, and I've heard nothing but positive things about all these various games and how absurd they were.
Yeah, and that's how often have you been like, oh, I want to watch this series on Netflix or this?
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, I want to get through my work so I can watch all of these people playing D&D.
And they've always been good. We've always had the chance to watch amazing people, whether it's Jeremy or Mike, any number of people, Deborah, to run these games. In all of these events, the Tomb of Annihilation streams were amazing. I mean, just as a dungeon master, as a player, if you want to watch people who are honing their craft, like it's incredible. And I'm sure this year was the same. And then there's the whole, the fact that it's this big reveal, right? And in some ways bigger than ever reveal. And I thought more carefully done. Like, I feel like this was even a better year for Wizards, Hasbro, all of that, to align partners, right? That there was a closer announcement of all the miniatures that are coming out and the supporting products and, the WizKids angle, the D&D Beyond angles, like all of that. It was perhaps even more tightly woven together through this format. So
let's talk about that reveal for just a second, in case people are catching up. The reveal was that the new adventure, the new storyline season, would be set in Icewind Dale, and the product is called Icewind Dale: Rime of the Frost Maiden. So that will be coming out in mid-September, as those products normally do. Along with that, there was the announcement of the supplementary products, including dice, including a, I think, $500 platinum edition Beetle and Grimm box set to go along with the adventure for those of you who want to spend half of $1,000 for your game. So if you want to do that, let me know.
I mean, I did purchase the silver box of Saltmarsh from them because I was really dying to know how good these are. And it is really good. And what I would say, what I would look at for this product, because $500 is no joke. But what I would say is it is really, really well done. It is very convenient. And if what you're looking at is to buy an adventure to run with a bunch of friends, and if you can get, some dollars from each of them, this is like the best purchase ever, right? And of course, there's always collectors and whatever, just because you love Icewind Dale or whatever. There are a lot of reasons why this can work for you. But you and I have talked about this before. The price per adventure for just like a normal $60 book, when you think about a campaign that you run, 60 sessions or whatever, like it's nothing. And you split it amongst everybody, like it's so cheap. And so this actually brings the cost to what is kind of it's still not even that crazy a level when you're talking about the whole group and how many times you're playing it. So I just want to pause and say that I think that having seen a couple of these box sets and also at conventions, like it's pretty cool. If you can, it's neat.
Yeah, and that's something that you've talked a lot about, and I've talked a lot about, and I think you've even talked about it together. It is, if this hardcover book gives you 500 hours of game, then the cost per hour is reasonable, even at $500.
Yeah, even at $500.
And of course, you don't need to do that, but if it enhances the experience of you and your players, then it is worth it in terms of your entertainment value. Yeah,
and I think this weekend they had it 10% off, so it was like $450 or something like that. Just makes it a little easier.
Yep. So thoughts on Icewind Dale?
So I think Icewind Dale is an awesome region. It's a region that I think captures the imagination. Like it's very D&D, you
Hmm.
know, inhospitable, cold, you know, the snow, the dangers, monsters that are fairly alien but yet kind of feel like they're natural, like they're ecologically based, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
yetis and remoras and creatures like that. They're just very exciting. You can't help but come with where this place started, which is through the mind of R.A. Salvatore and all of his Drizzt Do'Urden series books and the companions.
Yep.
Um, I recently read the first book. I had not read that in a very, very long time, and I read it with my son. And there are a few things that are dated, particularly
Mhm.
how his take on a lot of women.
Right.
Though I know he's improved that in his later writing, but you know, it's very antiquated. It
Hmm.
feels like the '90s. Uh,
Right.
but but the story itself is actually quite engaging, and my son and I had a great time reading through that. And it's very imaginative. It's a cool story. It's a neat idea. This idea of the Crystal Shard, Crinchinaban, and the Carcassel, and the Arcane Brotherhood, and the Ten Towns, and all of their squabbles that they have, the Barbarian Horde, and the dwarves, and giants. I mean, it's rich stuff. It's rich, great D&D, and going back there has never felt to me like too much for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, it's because there is that richness and diversity of story that you can tell there, but it's still very much settled in both fantasy tropes, yeah, and in D&D lore.
Yeah,
And I was wondering, the last season we got was Baldur's Gate plus Avernus, and Baldur's Gate being the darling of the D&D video games, right?
yeah,
Most of the video games that people talk about with D&D are either called Baldur's Gate or set in or around Baldur's Gate. And then the second large video game that came out based on that Baldur's Gate sort of there's a name
yeah.
for the software,
Right.
was Icewind Dale.
Right. I played, so I didn't play Baldur's Gate. Shock. I know I'm like that
Okay.
geek, but I played that Icewind Dale game and its
Yeah.
expansion and Icewind Dale 2 forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I played the first Baldur's Gate and then I missed a couple of them, but then Icewind Dale was the next one I played. And you definitely have that. It's different, but it's still D&D.
Yeah.
So much so. And what I've also found interesting is, with the last few releases especially, they've tried to kind of give you a setting but then give you a theme.
Yeah.
Um, so Baldur's Gate was, this is Baldur's Gate, but you are in hell, and you had the Mad Max theme, you had that sort of feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
With this one, it looks like they're going for a more horror based theme,
Mm-hmm.
based on everything.
And
Their tagline is,
solitude and
yeah, a tale of terror that revisits forlorn flickering candlelights of civilization, and then bone chilling locations. So I've heard a lot of mention of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness as kind of a theme, as well as The Thing,
yeah.
John Carpenter's
Yeah.
movie The Thing. So that's sort of this paranoia, isolation, secrets, not knowing who to trust. So I think that will make a very interesting campaign, as long as people can separate it from what's happening in the real world with the isolation and the paranoia.
Well, or
That's
yeah,
going on.
or maybe even dip into it a bit, but from a sense of acknowledgement, while still being a fantasy thing, right? Like,
Sure.
you know what it's like to be alone or isolated, but you but you're fantasizing it in a different way and working with it, right?
Right.
I think that can be healthy. The
And
writing, yeah,
even if there is isolation, you're with other party members.
yeah,
So
right.
yeah, that hopefully
And
will.
you're still gonna be a bunch of idiots at the table making silly jokes. So.
That is always important as well.
And how about the writing team?
Oh, I mean, diverse, great.
Yeah, a ton of women, right? Majority
Yep.
women team, which might be, I mean, other than like early AD&D releases and a few other kind of because there are two people and, one of them is women or a woman. This is,
Right.
a really big step. And Wizards, a friend of mine was saying this recently that Wizards tends to not disclose anything that's not out or anything about anything that's not out. And so like they'll have discussions about diversity, but they won't say like, hey, right now we have this writing team, right? And you only see it when it comes out, even if it's a year later or whatever. And it's very cool to see a number of new writers there. And even when they've had such success with really talented writers in the past, that they would switch and bring in a new team like this is cool to see and very thought provoking.
Yeah, it's great to see. And, based on things that I've heard, just, rumors flying around, it's only going to get more diverse as future products come down the line. So it's good to see that, Wizards has put out statements on diversity and so on, and that they are following up, even if they can't or don't talk about it immediately. You're absolutely right.
And Wizards seems to acknowledge that they're not perfect, but they're working on it, right? I mean, none of us are, but yeah, which is good to. That's a generally a healthy way to be approaching things. So it's cool. Yeah, I'm excited. The reveal was neat. I think it's a known thing that I've play tested stuff before, so I don't always have, like you, I don't always have the surprise effect that other people do. But back when this was a surprise to me, it was a very welcome one, and I'm excited. This is certainly one of the adventures that when it's been announced, I'm like, I want to play this. I want to run this. This is neat.
Yep, there are great stories to tell here. A diverse number and variety of stories to tell, and I can't wait to see not only what's in the final version of Rime of the Frost Maiden, but for the Adventures League, what comes out for that, and for the Guild Adepts, right? What stories do they tell? And then once it's opened up on the DM's Guild, what stories and products and ideas the community as a whole can come up with.
Yeah,
because I think it's going to be interesting to see what the diverse creative minds out there can come up with.
Well, I'll certainly do my part. When this was announced, I had to touch base with Eric Mengi, since we worked together during Tomb of Annihilation, to do jungle treks, and we're going to do a ice treks for sure, because there are just so many cool encounter ideas that deal with frost and snow and the creatures from these realms and the lore and the Arcane Brotherhood and all of this. Yep. Let's do another one.
Yeah. And speaking of lore, this is one of those areas where the lore has been around for a long time. The lore has been treated in novels, in games, in products, game products, and it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's good, as you said about some of the early novels, it's good if it changes. So it will be interesting to see what this new product, especially with a lot of new writers on the project, how it's changed and what they can come up with based on that lore that doesn't necessarily cling to lore.
Yeah. I mean, so, there were the games that took part this weekend, which I'm sure we'll go back and talk about. They had an interesting change in them, in that they talk about this strange black substance that is found in one of the encounters that you wrote. Card, I think it's Chardalyn. And that's a really neat take, because Chardalyn is in the past something that the Netherese would mine, and it's tied even to the ancient progenitor races that came long ago in the Forgotten Realms. And it is a very brittle substance that's used by the Netherese to store spells. And you can then sort of break this thing and the spell is released. And so it was highly coveted, but it was a slightly different substance, right? And now it looks like this has been combined with the lore of Icewind Dale, which an Icewind Dale idea was that when Crunchinabon, the artifact, forms this huge black tower that looks like ice, it taints the area around it and has caused growth throughout Icewind Dale of a hard black mineable substance that's more like an iron or some sort of softer metal that you can shape into weapons. And that used to be called black ice, and it looks like we've removed that term, which is probably a good thing.
Right.
And joined the two lores together into this substance, which is very cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's the perfect piece of lore, to discuss how things change over time. And for some people different is bad, for some people different is good, but in reality different is just different. And it's what you do with the difference that matters creatively than it is clinging to the past or changing the past.
Absolutely. Just make it richer and make it fun.
Right. Yeah. So any other thoughts on the Icewind Dale itself, on that?
No, but something related. So I heard you had a hand. Greg Tito, on the last segment of D&D News, I guess the format's changing. He announced yesterday, so he gave kudos to you because you wrote the introductory adventure. And he also said that you were involved in some of the VR planning and storytelling.
Yeah, a bit. That's all, that's all NDA stuff.
Okay.
But let's just say that this, the pandemic changed the way D&D Live works. I think we could safely say that. And so over time, the story, the different ways to engage the audience changed. So there was a absolutely fabulous team that was going to put together an in-person D&D Live experience. Let's the best way to talk about this is to segue into a new topic, which is online conventions.
Yeah.
Or online things, right? So D&D Live in the past, as you said, last year, it was in a sound studio or a television studio, and you could play D&D, but it was just in this epic adventure, last 3 hours, and then you were done, and then you were back off going through the dealer area or mingling with the stars, whatever. And it was decided that we needed shorter but more available content. So the 1 hour adventure idea came up. And great. That way you can play for an hour. If you want to continue playing, you can, but you're not stuck in a room playing for 4 hours if you would rather be doing something else. And so a lot of the planning revolved around that. And then all of that had to be thrown out because we can't be there in person. So how do we make it work in this online venue? And the team that Greg put together to work on that involved, online content creators, puzzle creators, online game creators who were amazing. I couldn't hold a candle to any of them in terms of the ideas and so I was just kind of there to say, here's what I've written. Let's see how we can make it kind of work together. And so that my involvement in the VR portion was minimal, except to nod in awe at these creators.
People like Alyssa Teague who just
exactly with just so many great ideas, and watching them work together and come up with these ideas it's one of those times when you just shut up and you just watch and you just listen and you just try to learn a little bit of what they know.
Yeah, that's great.
So that was my experience there. But in terms of then moving it to an online venue, it became what we're losing some things, yes, but what do we gain from that? And you can gain a lot from that, I think, as we found out, because of the technology that's available now, because of the spread of the game of D&D to new people in new places, which you found out when you were running the online game. Could you talk a little bit about your experience with running the missions?
Gladly, because it was one of the greatest pleasures I've had. So my understanding is that at some point in the discussion process, the folks at Wizards and at Baldwin Games were saying, hey, we could even offer some tables in Spanish. And so when the call for Dungeon Masters came out to the group of DMs that usually do events like D&D Live or Winter Fantasy or Origins or Gen Con, it said, other languages of interest, mention if you can run in those. So I reached out to Dave Christ of Baldwin Games and I said, yeah, I'd totally run some tables in Spanish. And then when the room assignments came out, and this was all, as you're saying, like there was a lot of change, right? A lot was happening fast, quickly. Everybody was trying to juggle a lot of things. And so the schedule comes out and it says all my tables are in Spanish. I'm like, okay, cool. All right. I gotta, brush up on my Spanish and pull up open up my 5e Spanish book and remember what the different classes are called, because a wizard and a warlock and a sorcerer, you got to remember which is which, right? And and all those kinds of things. And what is a saving throw? Okay, right. And so I just started, and I would translate your adventure because I wanted to have the box text sort of translated to have that firmly in my mind. And I began working on this, and all hoping that someone's going to show up to these tables. Right. And the result was astounding. I wrote down some numbers. We had 9 tables in Spanish. Mm-hmm. We had 43, and I didn't keep perfect numbers. It was only like after the first day that I thought, I should try to remember what I had on the first day and actually track this. But it was at least 43 players across the 9 tables, at least 20 unique players. And what's crazy, and countries, I had players in one game. I had players from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Spain in a 4-player table, right? And then we had Uruguay, the US, and so, it was really amazing to do this. And like you said, the technology just allows you to do this. Like we're having really quite clear connections from the tip of Argentina in South America to Oregon, right? And a person in Spain all at the same time. It's amazing. And these are folks who never could have gone to D&D Live. And can't go to Gen Con or Origins or places like that, and they can participate. And the English table's reporting similar things. There are people from Australia and the UK and all over, Japan, China, who want to be a part of this and now can. And having tables in Spanish language was great for me. It was super fun, and the players were amazing, and the players were thankful. Like they felt like, so thank you, Wizards, for acknowledging us and involving us, right? It meant a lot to those players that this was a possibility for them to play in Spanish and to have this. And all of this happened with very little planning, with very little outreach, right? It's not like we were going out to South American playgroups and saying, oh, hey, by the way, this is happening. It was word of mouth. It was a few tweets, a blog post here and there, but there wasn't an official Spanish D&D page or anything like that. It was really quick, and it was amazingly successful.
Yeah, just talking with some of the DMs, as you said, probably at least 30 countries represented, maybe even more. From just my quick poll of DMs, and from all time zones, from all walks of life. Just an incredible way to do D&D that, as Teos said, happened in a couple of weeks, basically, right? This wasn't something that has been planned for a year. This is something that's, we need to do this. How can we make this happen? And kudos to Baldman Games and all the DMs that ran, because that's it's a tough job DMing. DMing online when you're not used to tools is a whole other obstacle, and then making it work. It's kind of fly by night. DMing is necessary, and it's the future, right?
Yeah. And one of our DMs, she was saying, this is the most nervous I've ever been to play. And I think that was true for a lot of us. We spent a lot of time talking about this in the Discord chat that we had for DMs, because it really was like a completely new thing to take on. You had to not just run the adventure, but there was all this platform stuff you had to deal with, right? The Discord channel before the game, and making sure people remembered where to go to, and here's my Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or Zoom or whatever link. it was new skills and new improv, and it was nerve wracking. I was probably as tense as I've been as a DM since one of my first conventions. Like
Yeah.
it was cool though. It was really neat.
It was neat because I DM'd, just a few slots, let's say, and sitting there waiting. I use Zoom, so I was sitting there and I'm waiting for people to come into the waiting room, and you don't know. And at a convention, right? You're the DM, you go to your table, and you can watch the players walking up toward you, and
Yeah.
you can immediately start saying, okay, how am I going to adjust the adventure based on what I am seeing? Are they carrying a big box full of minis? Okay, they're going to want to play on a grid. So, and you can't do any of that when you're online. It's just there. Someone is now in your living room or your den or wherever your computer is, and let's do this. But it's such a testament to D&D as a brand and as a game that we have this sort of common language, and common experience and common love of story, that we could get past all of that and just get to the fun, and get to the communication, and it's a great tool for that.
It went really well. It was way beyond my expectations. I thought there were going to be a lot of major technical issues, and that we might have some really hard lessons that we took from it. And while there was a lot that I think we all learned from the event, it was overwhelmingly positive, and left me with this feeling of, wow, we can do this. And what's interesting is, you've had a lot of really great guests on your show recently, and one of them was Chris Lindsay from the Organized Play program. He said something that I sort of interpreted as Wizards is thinking that there's an online component sort of from here on out. And that's not necessarily policy or anything, but it's sort of like what I kind of heard, and it's at least has to be a possibility, not only for Wizards, but for any convention, to think that, I need to build up this expertise now and offer this, because we're not going to have a physical Gen Con. We're going to have Gen Con online in a couple of weeks. But while we're at it, let's think about whenever we maybe have some physical presence, we also can keep having this, and you can have people from around the world come together and be part of Gen Con and any of these conventions remotely, in addition to whatever might take place physically, if and when.
Yeah. And that's why I've heard more than one person saying, within this last 6 months, with all the conventions that have gone online, things are different now. Things will be different going forward. Even, Winter Fantasy, say, if and when we have Winter Fantasy in Fort Wayne, Indiana, on the last weekend of January, there will be Winter Fantasy online for anyone who wants to play from anywhere around the world. And if you continue that thought process, maybe I'm getting all like Star Trek, the world's perfect, but why would we stop there, right? Why is there not I feel like playing D&D for 2 hours, I'm going to go to the Wizards website and see what games are playing right now? Why can't that happen? And I think this weekend was the first step in a long road, but we're on that road now,
and we have to learn how to do it, right? Because like Wizards started up an official Discord channel, which made me somewhat laugh, because it's funny how they'll have like forums, no forums, and then now we've got a Discord channel, and this Discord channel, good luck to anyone who wants to read every message posted there.
Right.
It's it's way more volume than I can handle.
Sure.
But it's there, and it does include a place where you can chat and say, I'm looking for a game, and it's like what you're talking about, right? That idea that you could just come to this and receive support, and if the technology improves, because I think in a lot of ways these virtual tabletops, they're all not where we want the tools to be in some way, each one in a different way, but they're not quite there. They're not quite doing what we need, and there is a theoretical. You can see how it could be like, I want to be in a game, let's go to a game, and make that easy and happen, right? And that could really, if that happens, then it all just could explode. You could literally play D&D at any time with people from around the world, and if you need a particular language, you play in that language, or you play in English or whatever, right? Like it really could be facilitated.
Yeah. And the only question then is, I'm going way out there now, but you have every single game that you can go online and you're in, D&D online or the what's the
Roll20
one? No, the video game that you live
Neverwinter.
stream, Neverwinter, right? So you can play whenever you want.
Yeah.
You go online and you can,
Yeah.
but adding a DM to the process is both a difficult hurdle, but it's also what D&D is, right? And that's where the fun, that's where the personalities, that's where all of that comes to a head. And making that something that's available to people, whether it's for just a short spurt or whether it's for a long campaign, that's a killer app without being an app. So
well, that is the magic. The magic is how people come together, and it was so true this weekend. Table after table, it was the dynamics between these different players that would just create these hilarious scenes, and in and around the framework of the adventure, right? I mean, that's what it's all about.
Right. Nothing. And I would have DMs come to me later and say, well, I played this way. Is that what you meant? And I was like, no, but what you did was much better than what I wrote, right? Because the players thought it was great. The players thought it was challenging or moving or hilarious. And so that's what we need you to do. It doesn't matter what I wanted. It's what you and the players wanted. So thank you for doing that, even though it's not even close to what I was thinking when I wrote it.
Well, and kudos to you, because you always write these great intros that provide a lot of flexibility and allow for things to go in a variety of directions. And it's neat to see that. It's really neat to see when you have scenarios. And it's not like people just walk in and murder what's ever breathing inside and claim the treasure. It's how they're interacting with everything that's in this location and the hilarious stories. And I don't want to spoil it because I know this is going to run at other conventions, is my understanding. So I don't want to spoil it, but there are some events at my table that I'll have to tell you later because they're just so funny. I mean, and we're all laughing as the player, one of the players comes up with this concept or they're exciting, like things that were, as you're sliding down this hill and these really fun ideas come up and they're kind of wacky, like, sure, I'll give you a disadvantage. You could try that. And oh my God, it worked. And okay. And then this other person comes up with a follow-up idea and that's the best.
Yeah.
Love it. Love the game.
Right. And the different ways that the DM can choose to run it is super important, right? To the fun at the table at the time. So good stuff. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention? I mean, I feel like we barely scratched the surface of this, but we're getting toward that hour mark. So I wanted to see if there's anything else that came to mind worth mentioning about D&D Live.
I mean, D&D Live was fascinating to just see how it's evolved over just a few years. I can't thank the team at D&D enough. Folks like Greg Tito who are charged with having the vision of this, Chris Tulak, and all those kinds of individuals that have to think about how to shape these events. Good things are coming of it. None of these are never flawless or anything like that, but really good work is done, and it's cool that the D&D can operate on this scale. And I guess one thing I would say is what was interesting to me thinking about this is that some of what we've been talking about, this idea of like gathering players online and things like that, it's something that smaller companies can do too, right? They can't pull off D&D Live, but they sure can pull off an online convention that introduces some new storyline, right? Or new product line. And I wonder if we won't see more of that because it's exciting and it's a way to pull the whole globe together. And I have had my ear to the ground recently about how, in really interesting ways, RPGs are growing in other countries in formats and methods that we would never think of. And the more that companies, I think, open their minds to these new possibilities, they can help further them, and that can be really significant revenue for them and branding and outreach and all that thing, which
Mhm.
gets more people playing, more people having fun all over the globe, and unites us, which is important.
Yeah. Yeah. The same tools for running games that D&D Live used, anyone can use
Yeah.
for a very low cost.
Yep.
So that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
Well,
amazing.
Teos, thank you for coming on to share your experiences with us.
Thanks. I mean, if I can plug one thing, because you have
Yeah,
a lot of
please do.
creators on your show, I do want to encourage all of the many writers who listen to this to check out the Code of Conduct for RPG projects. I worked on this with a number of people that gave me their time and expertise. And what it tries to do is create a code that you can use, and you can freely modify it, change it, even publish it, as long as it remains free and it provides attribution to the original one. But the whole point of it is to create safer projects and to allow for a safer space when people are working together. So folks who do collaborative projects on the DM's Guild, or even within RPG projects themselves, should take a look at it and try to use those principles.
Yep. And that's, I think, in an upcoming episode, we're going to talk about that, as well as safety tools in games.
Cool.
So we'll make sure that we check that out at that point.
Yeah, it's meant a lot to me. I've already heard 2 projects that are using it, so that makes me feel very good about it.
Awesome. And thank you all out there for being listeners. I want to give a couple Patreon shout outs. We have Jeff Stevens, Jim Morrison, Joe Rosso, John Just John, MT Black, Matthew Petrozelli, Padme's Lover, Robert Dorgan, Ryan Bolter, and Troy Pickleman. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And thank you so much for listening out there. You can go to patreon.com/MMP if you want to be a patron. You get access to special content from Down with D&D, Misdirected Mark Productions, and Pandas Talking Games. If you can't help us monetarily, that's cool. We're good with that. But if you could give us a review on whatever medium you listen on, that would be great. Or just talk about us on social media if you enjoy our content. So Teos, where can people follow you on social media and follow your work?
I am on Twitter at AlphaStream, and my blog is alphastream.org.
Cool. And you can follow me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or you can talk with me on the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Hey, Teos, what are we going to do now?
Let's go kill some monsters on skis.
Hey, how do you say go kill some monsters in Spanish?
Vamos a matar unos monstruos.
Sweet.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?